doubted her, mocked her, regretted it in front of everyone.
Is there a finer legal mind in all of Africa? The judge inquired, peering down at the young woman of color who had just risen from the last row of seats. A few individuals in the courtroom let out chuckles. Judge Harold Whitmore leaned back in his seat, a smirk playing on his lips. The most accomplished legal professionals in this nation have already abandoned your grandmother's cause, so unless you've jetted in from abroad with some extraordinary academic credentials, please resume your seat before you further humiliate yourself. More laughter ensued. Maya Williams, a young woman of color whose face bore the imprint of hardships far exceeding what someone her age should have endured, remained standing. Her grip tightened on the well-worn folder she held, but her expression remained impassive. At the defense table, 74-year-old Evelyn Williams lowered her gaze in a moment of profound shame. Whitmore, noticing this, pressed on. You people perpetually believe fervor is a suitable replacement for formal instruction, he declared. This is a judicial chamber, not a place for religious testimonials. The room filled with awkward titters. Maya lifted her chin. No, Your Honor, she stated calmly. This is indeed a courtroom, and that is precisely why I'm standing. The laughter began to subside. Whitmore narrowed his eyes. Maya's voice gained a new firmness. And I am informing this court at this very moment I will secure victory in this case for my grandmother. A ripple of incredulity spread through the room. Martin Keene looked up abruptly. Even Evelyn turned in shock. Maya continued, undeterred. And if I falter, she declared, her voice resonating to every nook of the courtroom, then whatever punishment or consequence befalls her, let it fall upon me as well. The room erupted in gasps. Evelyn sprang to her feet, halfway out of her seat. Maya, no! Whitmore barked out a stunned laugh. You must have lost your senses. Maya's gaze remained fixed on him. If my grandmother is to be incarcerated for something she did not do, then I shall occupy that cell beside her rather than stand here and allow this to transpire in silence. Utter silence descended. No one laughed any longer. The sheer audacity of it, the unbridled, reckless devotion in her words, struck the room with more force than any anger could have. Even the bailiff stared, transfixed. Whitmore's countenance hardened, morphing from disbelief to sheer contempt. Well, he stated icily, that may be the most foolish declaration I have heard in this courtroom all year. He pointed at her with his pen. You possess no degree, no license to practice law, no standing, no legal authority, and now, it seems, no common sense whatsoever. He gestured toward the spectator benches. Sit down before your little performance results in your removal. Maya remained on her feet. Whitmore clasped his hands. Allow me to save everyone some time, young lady. Your grandmother's case has undergone scrutiny by licensed attorneys, senior counsel, and legal aid representatives. Each and every one of them understood what you, apparently, do not. This case is concluded. He flipped a page. The facts are unequivocally clear. The debt is undeniably clear. The filings are precisely clear. The law is unassailably clear. Then he looked at her again, this time more slowly, his gaze lingering on her discount store coat, her worn shoes, the inexpensive folder in her hands. And frankly, he declared, I am disinclined to prolong my docket because a spectator from the gallery believes that observing courtroom proceedings on the internet has somehow transformed her into an attorney. The laughter that followed was weaker, more hesitant, as the room began to sense that this was no longer mere entertainment. Maya heard someone whisper behind her, Lord, she truly means it. Another voice murmured, That girl would lay down her life for that woman. Whitmore folded his hands. Do you comprehend your fundamental issue? He inquired. Maya remained silent. You have mistaken self-assurance for genuine capability. He nodded toward the front of the room. That designated area is reserved for legal professionals, individuals who have successfully passed the bar examination, people who have rightfully earned the privilege to address this court, not for irate relatives who mistakenly believe that raising one's voice can alter the course of justice. His voice grew stern. You should be grateful that I am even permitting this interruption. Evelyn turned and looked back at Maya. Her face was etched with pain, not personal fear. It was fear for Maya, fear that her granddaughter was deliberately stepping into a conflagration she could not possibly survive. Maya, my dear, she whispered, please, sit down. Whitmore offered a small, self-satisfied nod. Sound counsel from your grandmother. He then reached for the gavel. If there is nothing further, this court will— Your Honor, Maya interjected. Her voice cut through the room once more. Whitmore paused. She took a single step forward. The bailiff straightened. Martin Keene frowned. Maya's voice remained composed. I am requesting 5 minutes before you render that judgment. Whitmore stared at her as though she had communicated in an alien tongue. Then he laughed. He actually laughed. You are requesting, he repeated. Young lady, the sole thing you are in a position to request is leniency for squandering this court's valuable time. He surveyed the room. This is precisely what transpires when individuals confuse online searches with actual education. A few nervous titters surfaced. Whitmore pointed toward the exits. Sit down, leave, or I will have you escorted out. Maya did not move. The entire room seemed to tense. Whitmore's face darkened. Are you deaf, girl? No, sir, Maya replied. Then perhaps you are slow. The insult struck the room with the force of a physical blow. Even those who had previously laughed now fell silent. Whitmore leaned forward. Allow me to illuminate something for you. Your grandmother is forfeiting this residence because objective facts carry more weight than subjective emotions. Contracts are paramount, superseding mere tears, and no amount of dramatic posturing from the back row will alter that reality. He pointed toward Martin Keene. That gentleman has practiced law for 27 years. Then he gestured to himself. I have presided over this bench for 18. Then he looked back at Maya. And yet, somehow, you presume a woman in her early 20s, lacking a degree, a bar card, and any legal standing, has unearthed something that all of us have overlooked. He shook his head. That is not courage. That is ignorance. Silence. Maya could feel the weight of every gaze in the room, each expectant for her to collapse, waiting for the impoverished black girl to realize she had overstepped her bounds, waiting for shame to accomplish what power had anticipated, but Maya had lived her entire existence under the shadow of shame. She had felt it when educators presumed she had cheated due to her exceptional grades. She had felt it when patrons handed currency to her Caucasian colleagues rather than to her. She had felt it when individuals addressed her grandmother with condescension in shops, implying that poverty and advanced age equated to diminished intellect. Shame no longer instilled fear in her, not compared to the prospect of losing her grandmother's home. Not like witnessing the woman who had raised her being erased before a gathering of strangers. She lifted the folder. Whitmore rolled his eyes. And what now? Maya spoke with distinct clarity. What if I were to inform you, Your Honor, that the statute upon which you are relying was amended 4 months ago? The room froze. Whitmore's expression remained unchanged. Then he smirked. No, Maya continued. What if I were to inform you that the legislation governing hardship protections for elderly homeowners was revised prior to this hearing, and the filing utilized by opposing counsel is based on an outdated version? Martin Keene's smile vanished. Whitmore glanced at him, then back at Maya, and then laughed again, though with less conviction. You expect this court to believe that every attorney who reviewed this matter somehow missed that? Maya responded instantly. Yes. That solitary word landed with more impact than any shouted assertion. Whitmore's jaw tightened. You arrogant little— Page 14, Maya stated, opening her folder. Illinois Residential Protection. Denise Porter, the court clerk, looked up sharply. Martin Keene sat up straighter. Maya took another step forward. My grandmother is 74 years old. She has resided in that home for 32 years. No hardship review was conducted, no amended notice was served, no compliant filing was submitted under the revised statute. No one was laughing now. Whitmore stared at her. Maya's voice became sharper. So, with all due respect, Your Honor, if you issue that ruling today under the version of the law you just cited— She paused, then delivered the statement slowly enough for every person in the room to comprehend. You will be in violation of current state law in open court. Absolute silence. Whitmore's face underwent a transformation. Not anger, not mockery. Fear. A small, sudden, undeniable fear. Because for the first time since Maya had stood up, he was no longer certain that he was the most intelligent person in the room, and everyone could perceive it. Judge Whitmore's fingers halted mere inches above the gavel. No one in the courtroom moved. Martin Keene was the first to regain his composure. He forced a laugh that emerged thinner than he had intended. That amendment does not pertain to this situation, he stated hastily. She is misinterpreting the statute. Maya turned to him instantly. No, sir, she replied. You are disregarding subsection C because your filing is predicated on the prior revision. The protection is applicable to owner-occupied residences where the occupant is over 70, has maintained primary residency for more than 15 years, and falls below the hardship income threshold. My grandmother meets every single requirement. Keene's jaw tightened. She is not qualified to interpret statutory language in this courtroom. Maya did not look at him. She does not require qualifications to read what your office failed to. A low murmur rolled through the gallery. Whitmore slammed his palm on the bench. Enough! Silence crashed down once more. He looked toward Denise Porter. Clerk, please verify the statute. Denise immediately turned to her terminal. Keene stepped forward. Your Honor, with all due respect, this is preposterous. We are permitting an unlicensed observer to derail a lawful proceeding based on legal arguments she has no standing to present. Whitmore's eyes remained fixed on the clerk. Then if she is mistaken, counsel, he said, this will be over in 30 seconds. Keene's confidence faltered. Denise's fingers moved across the keyboard. Maya stood perfectly still. Evelyn's breathing had become shallow. She clutched the bench so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Maya, she whispered. Baby, what have you done? Maya kept her eyes forward. What I should have done sooner. Denise stopped typing. Her expression shifted. That minuscule change in her face impacted the room more profoundly than a scream. Whitmore noticed it immediately. Well? He demanded. Denise swallowed. The amendment is indeed real, Your Honor. No one breathed. She looked at the screen again, then continued. Effective 4 months ago, Illinois Residential Protection Amendment. Subsection C includes mandatory hardship review, protections for elderly, fixed-income homeowners meeting residency requirements. Whitmore's face hardened. And does the defendant qualify? Denise glanced through the case file. She appears to meet the age requirement. Another pause. Residency records indicate 32 years at the property. A longer pause. Tax records and Social Security filings place her below the hardship threshold. The silence that followed was different from before. Previously, it had been the silence of humiliation. Now it was the silence of people realizing that authority had just been caught entirely unprepared. Martin Keene stepped forward swiftly. Your Honor, even if the amendment applies, the opposing party was never properly— Whitmore snapped. Heza. The judge's eyes cut back to Maya. Continue. Several individuals in the gallery visibly straightened. Maya opened another page in her folder. Because the amendment applies, she stated, the plaintiff was legally obligated to conduct a hardship review prior to filing an enforcement action. She lifted a second document. They did not. Another page. They were required to serve amended notice language reflecting the updated protections. She placed it beside the first. They did not. Another page. And they were required to provide the defendant an additional 30 days to rectify or contest under amended review procedures. She looked directly at Whitmore. They did not. His face had turned pale. Whitmore turned sharply toward him. "Counsel, is that accurate?" Keene hesitated. That hesitation was sufficient. Whitmore's voice rose. "Mr. Keene." Keene cleared his throat. "It appears the filing may have been prepared under the previous statutory template, pending office update." The room exploded into whispers. "Office update?" someone muttered. "You mean they used the wrong law?" "My God." Whitmore banged the bench. "Order!" But the damage was done. Everyone had heard it. Everyone now understood what had nearly transpired. An elderly woman had come within mere seconds of losing her home, because professionals had neglected to update their paperwork. Whitmore's face flushed a deep red. Maya stepped forward before anyone else could regain control. "Your Honor, with all due respect, this is not a minor clerical oversight." Whitmore stared at her. She continued, "This court was seconds away from issuing a ruling under outdated legislation against a protected elderly homeowner. No one interrupted. The failure here is not technical. It is systemic." Keene opened his mouth. "Objection." "To what?" Maya shot back. "The truth?" A gasp swept through the room. Whitmore's expression darkened. "Mind your tone?" Maya nodded once. "Yes, Your Honor. Then, respectfully, allow me to rephrase." She turned slowly, looking from Keene to the other attorneys seated in the courtroom. "My grandmother was not almost removed from her home because the truth was weak." Her eyes moved back to the bench. "She was almost removed because the people paid to understand the law stopped learning." No one moved. Even the bailiff stood frozen. Whitmore's jaw clenched so tightly it appeared to be in pain. Denise lowered her eyes as even she recognized the truth of the statement. Keene attempted one last recovery. "The plaintiff can simply amend the filing and refile under corrected procedure." Maya cut him off. "Not before today's ruling is vacated and enforcement is halted." Whitmore looked at her sharply. She held her ground. "If this court proceeds despite confirmed procedural defects and statutory non-compliance, the ruling would be unlawful on its face." Keene snapped. "She does not dictate procedure in this courtroom." "No," Maya replied. "The law does." If you feel proud of Maya for standing up when no one else would, hit like on this video and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. You never know. Someone near you might be watching this story with you too. That statement landed with more impact than anything that had preceded it, because no one in the room could dispute that she had earned the right to utter it. Whitmore leaned back for the first time since this hearing had commenced. He no longer appeared to be in command. He looked like a man calculating the extent of the damage. If he overruled her now, he risked issuing an illegal judgment in a room full of witnesses. If he admitted error, he would humiliate himself, opposing counsel, and the court. Either way, the young woman he had so readily mocked had effectively cornered him. Evelyn sat trembling. Tears streamed down her face as she gazed at Maya, as if seeing her for the very first time. Whitmore exhaled slowly. Then he spoke. "This court finds that statutory protections under the Illinois Residential Protection Amendment may apply to the defendant." The room remained perfectly still. "In light of the procedural deficiencies raised regarding notice, hardship review, and filing compliance," he swallowed, "the pending enforcement ruling is suspended." A collective gasp filled the courtroom. Whitmore's face remained rigid. "All current proceedings are stayed pending full review and refiling under applicable law." Evelyn covered her mouth. Tears spilled down her cheeks. He looked as though he had been physically struck. Whitmore was not finished. He turned sharply toward Keene. "Mr. Keene, your office will provide a written explanation within 5 business days as to why this filing was submitted under outdated statutory authority." Keene nodded weakly. "Yes, Your Honor." Whitmore's eyes shifted back to Maya. The arrogance was gone now. Only bitterness remained. He spoke with deliberate care, every word forced through clenched teeth. "You may have prevented a serious error today," Maya stated. Whitmore continued. "But let us be unequivocally clear. This court does not appreciate theatrics." Maya met his gaze. "With respect, Your Honor," she said quietly, "neither does my grandmother." The gallery erupted. People began to clap. Some stood. The bailiff shouted for order. But it scarcely mattered now. The atmosphere in the room had fundamentally shifted. The perceived spell of authority had been shattered. Evelyn rose to her feet, weeping openly. "Now, Maya!" Maya turned at last. Her grandmother reached for her with trembling hands. Maya crossed the room in 2 swift steps and took them. "You saved my house," Evelyn whispered. Maya's own eyes began to burn. "For today," she replied. Evelyn pulled her into an embrace so powerful it seemed impossible for a woman of her age. The gallery watched in stunned silence. Denise Porter discreetly wiped at one eye. Even those who had laughed earlier now appeared deeply ashamed. Whitmore stood abruptly and exited through the side door without uttering another word. He could not bear to remain on that bench for another second. Martin Keene gathered his papers with trembling hands, avoiding eye contact with anyone. As Maya helped Evelyn toward the aisle, a voice called out from behind them. It was one of the older attorneys who had observed from the back. Gray-haired, impeccably dressed, his reputation forged over decades. He stared at Maya in open disbelief. "Where did you learn law?" Maya adjusted the worn folder in her hands. "At the public library," she replied. No one spoke because somehow that answer managed to humiliate the room more than anything else she had uttered all morning. As Maya guided her grandmother toward the courtroom doors, people began to step aside for them. Not out of pity, but out of genuine respect. And for the very first time in her life, Maya Williams walked through a room filled with influential individuals who no longer saw a disadvantaged young woman of color from the back row. They saw the woman who had just accomplished an extraordinary feat. People were still staring when Maya and Evelyn stepped into the courthouse hallway. No one rushed past them. No one spoke above a hushed whisper. The same attorneys who had completely ignored them that morning now stood along the walls, feigning to organize papers while stealing furtive glances at the young woman carrying a worn folder and assisting her grandmother. Evelyn clung tightly to Maya's arm, as if letting go might cause the entire morning's events to vanish. "You really did it," she whispered, a statement she had repeated what felt like for the 10th time. "Lord help me. You really did it." Maya squeezed her hand. "We stopped them. That's all." "No," Evelyn insisted, shaking her head through her tears. "Baby, you stopped everyone in that room from burying me alive with paperwork." They had nearly reached the elevators when someone behind them called out, "Miss Williams." Maya turned. It was Denise Porter, the court clerk. She approached carefully, glancing once over her shoulder as if ensuring no one from the judge's chambers was observing. Up close, Denise appeared older than Maya had initially thought, mid-40s, perhaps older, with the weary patience of someone who had spent years witnessing powerful individuals and less fortunate individuals bear the consequences. She lowered her voice. "You need to be very careful." Maya frowned. "About what?" Denise hesitated. "Judge Whitmore does not take kindly to being embarrassed, especially not publicly." Evelyn straightened. "He embarrassed himself." Denise offered a humorless smile. "Yes, ma'am. And men like him rarely forgive the person who compelled them to do so." Maya's expression hardened. "I wasn't seeking forgiveness." Denise studied her for a moment. Then she reached into the folder tucked beneath her arm and withdrew a business card. "If anyone gives you any trouble about what transpired in there," she said quietly, pressing it into Maya's hand, "call me. I can verify precisely what I witnessed." Maya looked at the card. "Denise Porter, Senior Court Clerk, Hook County Civil Division." She met Denise's eyes. "Why are you helping us?" Denise glanced back toward the courtroom doors. Then she replied, softly, "Because I've worked in that building for 14 years. Her voice dropped even further. "And this is the first time I have ever seen someone make that man afraid." She walked away before Maya could respond. Evelyn stared after her. "Lord." Maya tucked the card into her folder. The elevator ride down passed in complete silence. Only when they stepped outside the courthouse did Evelyn stop walking. "Maya." Evelyn grasped both of Maya's hands. "I need you to listen to me very carefully." Maya blinked. "Okay. What happened in there today?" Evelyn's voice trembled. "That was not normal." Maya almost laughed. I noticed. No, Evelyn insisted, squeezing tighter. I mean, what you did was not normal. You were standing before esteemed lawyers, a judge, all those individuals adorned with their credentials, polished suits, and distinguished titles. Evelyn's breath hitched. And you possessed more insight than all of them. Maya averted her gaze. I merely perused the legal texts. No, dear. Evelyn's eyes welled up once more. You did far more than merely read them. Before Maya could offer a reply, a voice, instantly recognizable, echoed from the courthouse steps. Maya. They both turned. Reverend Samuel Price was making a hasty approach, his necktie askew, his coat only partially fastened, clearly having hurried over the moment word reached him. Following closely was Mrs. Loretta Green, practically a jog despite her years. Child, Mrs. Green exclaimed. Green, is what they're saying true? Maya blinked. What exactly are they saying? Reverend Price paused before her, his chest heaving. That you stood up in open court and corrected a judge. Mrs. Green clutched Evelyn's arm. Loretta Johnson from the choir just texted me and said, you silenced the entire courtroom. Evelyn tilted her chin upward with pride. My granddaughter safeguarded my home. Mrs. Green gasped, then chuckled before embracing Maya in a powerful hug. Oh, bless your heart, the entire South Side will know about this before supper time. Maya felt a blush creep up her neck. Please, do not let them embellish the facts. Embellish? Reverend Price remarked. My dear, people are already deeming it a miracle. Maya shook her head. It wasn't a miracle. He offered a gentle smile. No, it was meticulous preparation. That word resonated more profoundly than any commendation because it represented something nobody truly grasped. This was not a stroke of luck, not an instinctive reaction, not some random divine intervention. It was the culmination of years spent poring over books in library alcoves while others slept, years dedicated to studying statutes for which there were no classrooms, years of self-instruction because no one else would undertake the task. Mrs. Green suddenly furrowed her brow. Wait a moment. She narrowed her eyes. If you possess such capabilities, why, in the name of all that is good, are you not practicing law? Maya let out a soft chuckle. Because law school demands a substantial sum, Miss Loretta. A hush fell over them. The older woman's expression fell. Reverend Price glanced from Evelyn to Maya, then stated quietly, That appears to be an egregious squandering of talent, bordering on a grave injustice. Maya offered a slight shrug. The world squanders talent daily. Her statement carried more weight than she had intended. No one contradicted her, for each person present understood the truth of her words. They began to walk towards the curb where Reverend Price had parked his vehicle. Midway to their destination, Maya detected the sound of approaching footsteps behind them. Heavy, purposeful steps. She turned. It was Martin Keene, the bank's legal counsel. His earlier composed demeanor had vanished. He appeared irate, humiliated. His breathing was labored. Miss Williams. Maya halted. Keene advanced with a brittle control, like a man holding himself together by sheer force of will. You should grasp one fundamental point, he declared. Mia stared at him. What transpired within those walls today does not bestow upon you the status of a lawyer. Evelyn instinctively moved closer to her granddaughter, a protective gesture. Mia responded with composure. I am fully aware. Keene leaned in conspiratorially. You were fortunate. Maya remained silent. You discovered a single amendment, a solitary oversight. His jaw tightened perceptibly. That does not grant you admittance to the courtroom. Still, she offered no retort. His voice lowered to a near whisper. You have caused considerable embarrassment to individuals who have dedicated decades to this profession. At this, Maya finally spoke. They embarrassed themselves. His facial features contorted. You have absolutely no comprehension of the adversaries you create by humiliating men occupying positions of such authority. Maya took a step closer. For the very first time, Keene found himself looking down, not with an air of superiority, but with a discernible uncertainty. "Perhaps then," she said softly, "they ought to refrain from humiliating impoverished individuals unless they are unequivocally certain of their own righteousness." Keene gazed at her for a moment, then turned abruptly and departed without another word. Mrs. Green exhaled audibly. That man looked as though he were capable of gnawing on nails. Reverend Price opened the car door for Evelyn as Maya assisted her grandmother inside. Evelyn gently grasped her wrist. "Maya," she leaned closer, "you must make me a promise. What is it?" Evelyn's eyes searched hers intently. "Do not spend the remainder of your existence concealing the gifts bestowed upon you by God simply because this world has rendered them costly. My afro." The words struck a deeper chord than anything else that had been spoken that day, because concealed beneath every pragmatic justification, finances, work, life, timing, lay a truth she seldom acknowledged even to herself. A part of her had ceased to dream because dreaming inflicted pain when one was impoverished. It was far easier to endure than to harbor hope. Simpler to declare law school an impossibility than to confess that she yearned for it with an intensity that ached. She softly closed the car door and stood there for a brief interval. After the others had settled inside, her reflection gazed back at her from the window. The same coat, the same worn shoes, the same young woman who had entered the courtroom that morning anticipating nothing but defeat. And yet, nothing felt the same. Not after witnessing a courtroom filled with seasoned professionals regard her as if she belonged among them. Not after observing a judge falter in his certainty. Not after hearing a profound silence descend simply because she had spoken. That evening, the news spread precisely as Mrs. Green had predicted. By the time Maya and Evelyn returned to their home, 3 neighbors had already made visits, feigning casual proximity. A deacon from the church delivered a peach cobbler as a celebratory gesture. 2 women from the congregation telephoned to confirm the veracity of the story. An elderly gentleman from down the street called out from his porch, "Heard you brought some lawyers to tears downtown." Maya laughed. A genuine sound, the first of the day. But beneath the warmth, amidst the rejoicing, and alongside the swelling pride evident in Evelyn's eyes, something else had begun to stir. A thought, a rather audacious one. That night, long after Evelyn had retired for the evening, Maya sat alone at the kitchen table. The folder lay open before her, and beside it rested the business card of Denise Porter. Adjacent to it were an old, unpaid electricity bill and the acceptance letter she had never discarded. Chicago State University pre-law program admission, deferred, then expired. She gazed at it for a considerable duration, then slowly extended her hand and touched its corner. For years, she had convinced herself that circumstances had dictated her path, that poverty had made the choices for her, that survival took precedence. But now, another truth presented itself, undeniably apparent. Perhaps the world had not excluded her due to a lack of ability. Perhaps it had merely kept her out because no one anticipated girls like her would forcefully breach the barriers. And somewhere else in the city, Judge Harold Whitmore occupied his chambers, replaying the moment a young black girl from the Maya could barely find sleep that night. She remained at the kitchen table long after the house had fallen silent, her gaze fixed upon the old pre-law acceptance letter which lay beside Denise Porter's business card. The paper had begun to yellow at the edges. It had been folded and unfolded so many times that the creases had turned white. For years, she had kept it tucked away in a drawer, believing that discarding it would signify an admission of defeat. Yet, gazing at it brought a comparable measure of pain. She finally tucked it back into the envelope and stood across the room. Evelyn's voice drifted softly from the hallway. "You're still awake, my dear." Maya turned. Her grandmother stood there, clad in her robe, one hand resting on the wall for support. "You ought to be resting," Maya said. Evelyn offered a faint smile. "At my age, sleep arrives on its own schedule." She stepped into the kitchen and looked down at the papers scattered on the table. Then her eyes fell upon the envelope, Her expression softened. You kept it. Maya looked away. I just forgot to throw it out. No, you didn't. Silence permeated the air. Evelyn slowly lowered herself into the chair opposite Maya. You were intending to attend, she said quietly. Maya swallowed. That was a long time ago. You were meant to be the very first attorney our family would ever have. Mia let out a short, sharp laugh, and then life intervened. No, Evelyn stated firmly. Poverty intervened. The room became utterly still. Maya stared at the table. Evelyn reached across and gently placed her wrinkled hand atop Maya's. You relinquished that aspiration because your mother passed away. Because the bills accumulated, because I grew older, because someone needed to ensure this household remained standing. Her voice grew thick with emotion. But do not mistake sacrifice for destiny, child. Just because life obstructed your path does not imply that God erased it. Maya felt a constriction in her throat. Before she could offer a response, a distinct knocking sounded at the front door. Both women frowned, noting the late hour, nearly 10 o'clock at night. Maya rose and opened the door. Reverend Price stood on the threshold, his expression grave. My apologies for the late hour, he began, but I felt you should be informed. Maya's stomach plummeted. No. What is it? He stepped inside. I have a colleague in county administration. The atmosphere in the room immediately grew tense. He informed me that Judge Whitmore has already lodged a formal complaint. Maya's face hardened. Against me? Reverend Price nodded solemnly. He is alleging that you disrupted court proceedings, misrepresented your qualifications in a legal setting, and improperly interfered in an ongoing civil matter. Evelyn sprang to her feet. That man is retaliating against her for proving him wrong. He most certainly is, Reverend Price confirmed, and he is making no attempt to be discreet about it. Maya folded her arms resolutely. Can he do anything? Reverend Price exhaled slowly. He can certainly make things exceedingly difficult. The weight of his words settled upon the room, not because Maya was taken by surprise, but because Denise had previously cautioned her. Judge Whitmore harbored no capacity for forgiveness when faced with humiliation. Evelyn's eyes blazed with fury. That despicable man nearly confiscated my home and now seeks retribution because my granddaughter thwarted him. Reverend Price nodded grimly. The word is, he's categorizing the events as a flagrant breach of courtroom decorum. He intends for the official record to reflect that your actions far exceeded appropriate conduct. Maya offered a bitter laugh. So, he wishes to alter historical accounts. No, Reverend Price stated. He aims to safeguard his reputation before people begin questioning how a judge and an entire courtroom full of legal professionals overlooked an updated statute. Maya's jaw tightened. That was the precise truth of the situation. Men of Whitmore's caliber never admitted their errors. They either buried them or buried whomever dared to expose them. The following morning served to confirm these suspicions entirely. By 10 o'clock, Maya's phone displayed 3 unanswered calls from unidentified numbers. By noon, a local legal blogger had published an article under the title, Unlicensed Individual Disrupts Courtroom During Chaotic Foreclosure Hearing. Curiously, there was no mention of the outdated statute, nor any reference to Whitmore's near issuance of an unlawful ruling. It presented a carefully crafted narrative that portrayed Maya as reckless. By afternoon, the story had gained considerable traction. Some commenters lauded her as brave, while others condemned her as dangerous. Online remarks poured in, "She got lucky. She should have been arrested. This is precisely why amateurs have no place in a courtroom. Sounds like another activist stunt." Maya sat at the kitchen table absorbing these comments until Evelyn abruptly snatched the phone from her grasp. "Stop that." Maya rubbed her face wearily. "They are twisting it into something entirely different." Evelyn corrected. "Their intention is to—" That afternoon, Denise Porter placed a call. Maya answered with immediate readiness. "They are moving with remarkable speed," Denise stated without preamble. "I've noticed." Denise's tone was curt. Whitmore is determined to frame this as a mere courtroom disturbance before the legal community begins to dissect the actual events. Maya's eyes narrowed. Can he orchestrate that? He's certainly attempting to. Denise lowered her voice. However, there are individuals within that courthouse who are now speaking, albeit discreetly. Not everyone is willing to feign ignorance of what transpired. Maya sat up straighter. Then, why is no one voicing their concerns publicly? Denise offered a single bitter laugh. Because openly challenging a judge can effectively end careers. That response conveyed everything Maya needed to know. Truth alone was never sufficient, not when power entities had reputations to meticulously protect. That evening, Martin Keene made an appearance on a local legal radio program. He characterized the incident as an unfortunate spectacle orchestrated by an emotionally unstable bystander. Evelyn nearly hurled her coffee mug at the radio. Maya promptly switched it off. A profound silence descended upon the room. Then Evelyn spoke, her voice trembling with barely suppressed anger. You spared all of them from public disgrace, and this is their expression of gratitude? Maya stared straight ahead. No, she replied softly. This is how individuals in positions of power respond to humiliation. Evelyn's eyes sharpened. What are you contemplating? Maya stood and walked to the kitchen drawer. She retrieved the acceptance letter and placed it on the table. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Maya gazed at it for a long moment before uttering the words neither of them had truly anticipated hearing. I am finished allowing people of that caliber to dictate where I belong. Silence. Evelyn blinked, then slowly sat down. Maya. She picked up the letter, her hands trembling slightly. You truly mean this? Maya nodded. If they exhibit such apprehension towards me without a degree. She glanced towards the window, her jaw set with resolve. Imagine the degree of fear they will experience once I possess one. Evelyn began to weep, not quietly, not politely. These were the tears of an older person whose long-buried prayer had suddenly returned to life. Oh, my child. Maya knelt beside her chair. But I don't know how we will manage the expenses. We will find a way, Evelyn declared instantly. You can barely cover your medication costs. We will find a way, Grandma. We will find a way, she repeated, her voice growing stronger with each utterance. Because I did not raise a young woman capable of outsmarting an entire courtroom only to watch her spend the rest of her life apologizing for her extraordinary gifts. Maya laughed, tears now streaming down her face. A knock interrupted them. Mrs. Loretta Green entered without ceremony. As always, I caught wind of that radio foolishness. She stopped, noticing their tears. Why are both of you crying? Reverend Price followed her in, carrying a pie dish. Then his gaze fell upon the letter. He froze, looked from Maya to Evelyn, and then a slow smile spread across his face. Well now, he remarked, that expression on your face suggests someone has just made a significant decision. Within minutes, the entire room was privy to the news, and shortly thereafter, Mrs. Green emphatically declared, We are going to get this girl into law school, even if I have to bake pies until Christmas. Reverend Price chuckled. You might not need to go to such lengths. The church possesses a scholarship fund. Evelyn appeared stunned. Mrs. Green snapped her fingers. And my nephew works in admissions at the community college extension program. Reverend Price nodded in agreement, and if she requires letters of recommendation, she now has at least half the South Side ready to vouch for her. She managed to embarrass a judge with factual evidence. Maya stared at them, her voice barely above a whisper. You would truly assist me. Mrs. Green placed both hands on her hips. Child, the Lord did not allow you to walk into that courtroom and shake its foundations for mere amusement. Reverend Price smiled warmly. Sometimes purpose presents itself disguised as trouble. Maya surveyed the individuals in the room. The elders who had watched her grow, nourished her, prayed for her, and believed in her long before the wider world did. And for the first time in many years, hope did not feel like a childish fantasy. It felt attainable. Later that night, after everyone had departed, Maya once again found herself seated alone at the kitchen table. The acceptance letter lay before her, but now It no longer resembled a forgotten artifact. It looked like an open door. She picked up a pen and meticulously wrote her name across the top of the deferred application packet. Maya Williams, her handwriting steady. For somewhere in the city, Judge Harold Whitmore believed he was burying her through acts of retaliation. What he failed to comprehend was that men like him had spent Maya's entire existence attempting to keep doors firmly shut, and all they had ever truly achieved was, 2 weeks later, Maya Williams entered the admissions office, sporting the only blazer she owned and carrying the familiar, worn folder that had once silenced a courtroom. She had anticipated navigating stacks of paperwork. She had expected a barrage of questions. What she had not anticipated was the woman behind the desk looking up, staring for a full 2 seconds, and then stating, "You're the courthouse girl." Maya stopped. "Excuse me?" The woman immediately rose and leaned over the desk. "You're the young lady who corrected Judge Whitmore." Mia blinked in surprise. "People keep referring to it that way." The woman smiled. "Honey, half this city has been discussing it." She extended her hand. "Linda Matthews, admissions coordinator." Maya shook it. Linda lowered her voice. "My sister works in county records. She informed me of what truly transpired." Maya offered a small smile. "Then your sister likely knows more than the newspapers do." Linda smiled broadly. "Yes, we've taken notice." She gestured towards the chair in front of her desk. "Please sit. Let's discuss your future." Maya sat down carefully. Linda opened the application packet. "You were accepted into the pre-law transfer program 3 years ago." Mia nodded. "I deferred my enrollment due to changes in family circumstances." Linda studied her for a moment. "Most individuals who defer their admission for such an extended period do not return." Mia glanced downward. "Most individuals do not navigate a life like mine." Linda did not offer a counter-argument. She turned pages. "Your academic records were exceptional." Maya remained silent. "Your entrance essays were among the most compelling of that admissions cycle." Still, she offered no verbal response. Linda looked up. "So, I will ask you directly, why are you truly here now?" Maya thought of Judge Whitmore, of the radio broadcasts filled with falsehoods, of anonymous online commenters labeling her reckless, of Martin Keene's voice warning her against embarrassing powerful men. Then she answered, "Because I am weary of knowing that I belong in rooms that people persistently tell me I cannot enter." Linda gazed at her, then slowly smiled. "Well," she said, closing the folder, "that might very well be the most compelling reason I've heard all year." 3 days later, the scholarship committee from Reverend Price's church convened in the fellowship hall. Maya had anticipated a modest review session. Instead, nearly 20 individuals were present: deacons, retired educators, esteemed church mothers, older gentlemen with their arms crossed and firm opinions on nearly every subject. Mrs. Loretta Green occupied a seat in the front row, as if personally prepared to confront anyone who dared to question Maya's inherent worth. Reverend Price stood and addressed the gathering. "We are assembled here today because one of our own demonstrated immense courage in a courtroom filled with individuals who believed that education was a privilege reserved solely for those who could afford it." Heads in the room nodded in agreement. He then turned his attention to Maya. "You managed to embarrass a judge, child. That either signifies profound foolishness or exceptional giftedness." A brief pause ensued. Then he smiled. "And we are all quite aware of which quality you possess." A ripple of light laughter went through the room. The questions then began. They were not simple queries. They were substantial ones. How serious are you about this endeavor? What will happen when law school becomes exceedingly challenging? What if you falter? What if people treat you even more harshly than they already do? Maya responded to each question with unvarnished honesty, devoid of any pretense. When they had concluded their inquiries, the oldest deacon in the room, a stern man named Robert Ellis, slowly rose to his feet. He had remained silent throughout the proceedings. He regarded Maya for a prolonged moment before speaking. "My father toiled for 30 years cleaning train cars because opportunities for black men to perform more substantive work were non-existent." The room fell into an absolute stillness. My son became a dentist because my father endured immense hardship for that very right. He then pointed directly at Maya. If this young woman can outwit trained legal professionals before even setting foot in law school, and we allow financial constraints to impede her progress. He shook his head in disbelief. Then, shame upon each and every one of us. The motion to approve her scholarship was passed with unanimous consent. Maya remained frozen in her seat. Evelyn, seated beside her, began to weep before the vote had even been finalized. However, not everyone in attendance shared in the jubilant atmosphere. 3 days after the scholarship approval, Maya arrived at the diner where she worked in the mornings, only to find her manager waiting by the cash register. He appeared visibly uncomfortable. "May I speak with you in the back?" Her stomach clenched. Inside the storage room, he closed the door. "Maya, the corporate office called." She frowned. "Regarding what?" He rubbed his neck nervously. "Someone filed a formal complaint." A wave of dread washed over her. "What type of complaint?" He avoided her gaze. "They stated that you have become a controversial public figure associated with disruptive legal conduct." Maya stared, disbelieving. "You must be joking." "I wish I were." He explained that the business wishes to avoid any public controversy. Her face hardened. "So, I am being terminated." He looked utterly miserable. "They are referring to it as a suspension pending review?" Maya let out a single sharp, bitter laugh. "They fired me because I embarrassed a judge." He remained silent, for both of them understood that this was precisely the reason for the action. That night, Maya sat at the kitchen table, clutching her final paycheck. Evelyn looked at the check, then at Maya, and then uttered the words with a terrifying calmness. "They are attempting to starve you into silence for speaking your mind." Maya nodded her head in agreement. Reverend Price, seated nearby, leaned back heavily. "That is how established systems defend themselves when they cannot directly confront the truth." Mrs. Green slammed her palm onto the table. "This is blatant retaliation." Maya exhaled slowly. "No," she stated. "This is fear." Everyone turned to look at her. She lifted her chin resolutely. "They assumed that humiliating me would effectively silence me. It did not." She tapped the paycheck. "They believed that tarnishing my reputation would isolate me. It did not." Her voice sharpened with conviction. "So now they are resorting to what people invariably do when they lose the capacity to control your voice." She paused for effect. "Suppress it. They assault your very existence." Silence descended, because each person present understood her truth. Evelyn rose, proceeded to the storage unit, retrieved a worn metal receptacle, and placed it upon the surface. Maya's brow furrowed. "What is that?" Evelyn opened it. Within lay envelopes, currency, aged investment certificates, and folded banknotes. Maya gazed in astonishment. "Grandma!" Evelyn's gaze remained averted. "I began amassing this after your mother passed." The atmosphere in the chamber grew hushed. "For exigencies," she conveyed, pushing the container toward Maya. "No." Evelyn's tone turned subdued. "Yes." "No, Grandma." "Yes." Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes. "I did not endure all these years, labor through so many occupations, enter my offspring, and nearly forfeit my domicile merely to witness you abandoned now because of callous individuals who became apprehensive." Maya's own eyes began to sting. "I cannot accept that." "You can," Evelyn affirmed. "And you shall," Reverend Price concurred, "as will the congregation." Mrs. Green gestured towards Maya. "And should you require scholastic materials, sustenance, fuel, funds, academic coaching, whatever your need may be, this locality will support you until you are capable of supporting yourself." Maya's resolve crumbled. She covered her mouth, weeping into both hands, not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming burden of being believed in. Later that evening, subsequent to everyone's departure, she sat in solitude within her chamber, surrounded by scholarship applications, financial assistance forms, and enrollment documentation. Her mobile device vibrated, an unrecognized identifier. She responded, "Hello?" A male voice responded, its timbre low, tranquil, and alien. "You ought to have ceased after safeguarding your grandmother." Maya's blood turned icy. The voice persisted. "Law school will not alter your fundamental nature." Click. The connection terminated. Maya stared at the device. Her hand trembled. A minute later, another message materialized from an unidentified number. "Certain portals remain sealed for a reason." She remained immobile, then slowly set the device down. Outside her chamber, Evelyn inquired softly, "Dearest, are you quite all right?" Maya surveyed the application form scattered across her cot, then the scholarship notification, then the admission confirmations. Finally, she looked at the device. Apprehension permeated her being. A genuine dread, not of failure, nor of strenuous endeavor, but of what influential persons might perpetrate when an individual like herself declined to remain within the confines they had designated. She inhaled deeply, then again, before rising, proceeding to the kitchen and placing the device before Evelyn. Reverend Price read the messages aloud. Mrs. Green's countenance drained of color. Reverend Price's jaw tightened. Evelyn's eyes ignited. Then Maya turned to face them all and articulated the sole utterance that held consequence. "Excellent." They regarded her with astonishment. She lifted her chin. "If they are issuing threats now," her voice hardened, "that signifies they have at last grasped that I am resolute." And in that precise instant, everyone within the chamber comprehended the identical sentiment. The conflict Maya Williams had initiated within that courtroom was no longer solely about the One House initiative. It had escalated into a confrontation against every individual who had ever presumed that someone like her ought to acknowledge their designated position, and she had just determined she would never accept it again. Maya Williams commenced her academic pursuits 3 weeks hence. She boarded the earliest bus each morn, her satchel laden with borrowed textbooks and a knot of apprehension in her stomach that she resolutely refused to acknowledge aloud. The institution was more modest in scale than she had envisioned when her admission was first confirmed years prior. Yet, to her, it still felt like unfamiliar terrain, corridors teeming with individuals younger than herself, discussions concerning internships and LSAT preparation courses that she had never possessed the means to afford, instructors who spoke as if every attendee had emerged from an analogous, privileged background. By the conclusion of the inaugural day, Maya was acutely aware of the prevailing opinion held by many when they observed her. Too advanced in years to be commencing, too impoverished to assimilate, excessively earnest to belong, too black for the preconceptions they favored. She perceived it in the hesitant demeanor of some students when contemplating partnership with her. In the inquiry of one young woman, "So, what prompted your sudden decision to pursue law?" delivered with an inflection suggesting individuals of Maya's background typically did not. In the hushed exchange between a young man sporting an expensive timepiece and his companion during introductions, "That's the courthouse girl." Word had evidently disseminated. Her courtroom moment had preceded her into academia, even before she entered a lecture hall. However, Maya had not contended her way to this juncture to be intimidated by offspring possessing inherited wealth. During the second week of classes, Professor Leonard Hayes entered the Constitutional Foundation seminar bearing a pile of casebooks and the impassive expression of a man who had spent decades unimpressed by student discourse. He immediately commenced cold calling. One by one, students faltered through the assigned readings. Then his gaze settled upon Maya. "Miss Williams?" She looked up. She elucidated the legal import of procedural due process in its practical application, eschewing theoretical abstraction. The chamber fell silent. Several students shifted, relieved that the challenging query had not been directed at them. Maya responded, not with haste, nor with nervousness, but with clarity and thoroughness. She articulated due process as a tangible reality, not an academic construct, detailing its implications when judicial bodies circumvented established procedures, how technical infringements could devastate lives, and how systemic mechanisms employed documentation to mask inequity. Professor Hayes observed her without betraying any emotion. Upon her conclusion, He posed a follow-up inquiry, then another, and a third. Maya answered each one comprehensively. Finally, he closed his tome. Class was dismissed. The students blinked. That was it. No commentary, no commendation, nothing. As individuals gathered their belongings, one student muttered near the exit, "Teacher's pet already." Another vocalized under his breath, "Yes, courtroom theatrics win professors over easily." Maya disregarded their remarks, but as she collected her books, Professor Hayes addressed her quietly from the front of the room. "Miss Williams, kindly remain for a moment." The chamber gradually emptied. Once they were alone, Hayes clasped his arms. "Where did you acquire the capacity to conceptualize in such a manner?" Maya hesitated. "Life." He observed her for a prolonged interval, then gave a singular nod. A fitting response. He stepped nearer. "But allow me to impart something to you before this establishment does." Maya awaited his words. "Possessing innate talent is insufficient here." His tone was direct, though not unkind. "This institution will graciously tolerate intellectual brilliance from those born into privileged circumstances, from individuals such as yourself. It will, however, demand flawlessness." Maya offered no reply. Hayes proceeded. "You expose mediocre privilege with every instance you surpass it. That engenders adversaries." Her jaw tightened. "I am acquainted with that reality." He offered the faintest suggestion of a smile. "I had surmised as much." Then his expression became stern once more. "Therefore, determine now whether your presence here is intended to impress others or to endure beyond them." That statement resonated deeply with her, as by the middle of the academic term, the pressures intensified considerably. Certain instructors held her in high esteem. Others appeared vexed by her very presence. One fellow student accused her during a study session of consistently reframing legal theory into a matter of racial politics. Another openly questioned if her admission had been a result of a desire for publicity following that courthouse incident. A third remarked with a smile, "Well, at least you already possess the ability to create spectacles in court." Maya learned with alacrity that achievement did not eradicate prejudice. It merely rendered prejudice more inventive. Nevertheless, she consistently outperformed them. Quiz after quiz, case brief after case brief, argument after argument, she did not merely keep pace, she ascended. And the greater her ascent, the more animosity festered. At her residence, circumstances also grew more arduous. Academia demanded substantial time commitments. Time, in turn, necessitated financial resources, which were already in short supply. Maya dedicated her study hours to bus commutes, lunch breaks, and the parking area of a diner, while undertaking reduced weekend shifts at an alternative eatery, a consequence of her prior dismissal. She managed approximately 4, perhaps 5 hours of sleep on most nights. On certain evenings, she returned home utterly fatigued, collapsing into a chair before even removing her footwear. Evelyn observed this entire ordeal in quiet contemplation for weeks. Then one evening, she placed a plate of sustenance before Maya and stated, "You are exhausting yourself to death." Maya continued reading. "I am quite well." "No, you are most certainly not." Maya rubbed her eyes. "I've assigned reading due tomorrow, 2 essays this week, and a mock trial presentation on Friday." "And should you succumb," Evelyn's voice sharpened considerably, "I will not be the one to do so. You are not the sole individual making sacrifices for this aspiration, child. Therefore, do not dare insult the rest of us by destroying yourself before you achieve it." Maya finally raised her gaze. Evelyn sat opposite her, her expression as severe as it had been when Maya was 10 years old, and clearly fabricating a story. "Do you believe that fortitude equates to bearing every burden independently?" Evelyn inquired. "It signifies endurance." "No," Evelyn corrected. "It signifies recognizing when to permit others to assist you in carrying that which holds significance." Maya regarded her intently, then slowly closed her textbook. The subsequent week, assistance arrived, irrespective of whether she had solicited it. Mrs. Green orchestrated a system of neighborhood meal rotations, ensuring Maya always had nourishment prepared. Reverend Price arranged discreet transportation when the bus schedules proved unreliable. Church members surreptitiously placed grocery gift cards into Evelyn's purse when they believed Maya would not notice. Even Denise Porter occasionally dispatched legal articles or words of encouragement, accompanied by brief annotations such as, "I thought this might offer some support. Persevere." However, not everyone harbored a desire for her to persevere. Near the conclusion of the semester, Maya returned to her vehicle following an evening class and discovered the windshield fractured. A note was artfully placed beneath the wiper blade. "You received a warning." Her hands began to tremble. She read it twice, then a third time. There were no witnesses in the vicinity, no surveillance cameras focused on that particular area, and certainly no signature. Campus security documented the incident, but no tangible resolution was achieved. 2 days later, she discovered another communiqué concealed within her locker. "Certain individuals do not belong in the environments they forcibly enter." She took this message directly to Professor Hayes. He perused it, set it aside, and then fixed his gaze upon her. "Do you have any inkling as to who is responsible for this?" "No." He offered a nod. "Do you intend to discontinue your efforts?" Maya almost let out a laugh. "No." "Excellent." He slid the note back towards her. "Then endeavor to comprehend this early on, Miss Williams." She waited. The legal profession attracts two distinct types of individuals: those who seek justice and those who covet power. The latter group harbors a profound aversion to being challenged by the former. He paused. And they detest it even more intensely when the challenge originates from someone they deem to be beneath them. Maya's voice was quiet. "So, what course of action should I adopt?" Hayes responded without any hesitation. "Graduate." That singular word struck her with the force of steel. Not to contest them, not to engage in arguments, not to plead, not to defend herself. Simply to graduate, to outlast them, to triumph by remaining. That very night, Maya affixed the threatening notes above her desk, strategically positioned adjacent to her inaugural graded assignment, which bore the mark of an A+. And each subsequent night thereafter, when exhaustion tempted her to question the worthiness of her struggle, her gaze would invariably fall upon both the palpable animosity and the undeniable evidence of her progress. By the semester's close, the final academic rankings were posted. Students congregated en masse around the bulletin board. Murmurs filled the air. Then, a voice amplified sufficiently for all nearby to apprehend proclaimed, "Number 1. Another voice responded with disbelief, "Impossible." Then, a third voice declared, "Then it must be her." Maya advanced through the throng, her eyes scanning the rankings, and there it was. 1. Maya Williams. She stared, suspended in a single moment. She did not inhale. Then a bitter muttering emanated from someone behind her. "Unfathomable." Another voice replied softly, "No. What is truly unfathomable is that we continue to underestimate her." Maya stood there, gazing at her own name, at the apex, not merely surviving, not precariously maintaining her position, but triumphing, and somewhere in the distant reaches of the hallway, unnoticed by the majority, Professor Hayes observed, his arms clasped, a faint smile gracing his lips, for he understood what the others were only beginning to grasp. They had not admitted Maya Williams to law school, they had admitted a tempest, and the edifice was only just beginning to feel its impact. The ranking board's revelation fundamentally altered everything. By the following morning, the entirety of the law building was aware that Maya Williams had concluded the semester, securing the inaugural position in her cohort. Not the top 5, not the top 10, but number 1. The whispers followed her relentlessly. "That's the courthouse girl." She bested everyone. "She works 2 jobs. How is that even possible?" She must be cheating. That last insinuation spread with remarkable alacrity, for some individuals found it far simpler to question a woman like Maya's talent than to acknowledge its existence. Maya overheard these remarks in corridors, in restrooms, and outside classrooms where voices would deliberately lower their volume just as she passed. She largely disregarded them until an email arrived. Subject: Academic Integrity Review Request. Her stomach plummeted. She opened it. A formal notification. A complaint had been lodged, casting doubt upon the legitimacy of her examination performance in 2 distinct courses and formally requesting a review for potential academic misconduct. Maya stared at the screen, a cascade of disbelief, then anger, then a chilling resolve washing over her. Of course, she mused, when they are incapable of surpassing me, they resort to questioning whether I have legitimately earned my achievements. Professor Hayes was already present when she reached his office, holding a printed copy of the complaint. Be seated. Maya remained standing. They suspect I engaged in fraudulent practices. Hayes appeared entirely unfazed. No, they are aware you did not. This statement gave her pause. He tapped the document. This complaint was submitted anonymously, lacking any concrete evidence or specific allegations. It merely suffices to initiate a procedural review. Maya folded her arms. Then why entertain it? His expression darkened. Because institutions safeguard themselves by feigning that every accusation warrants equal consideration. Maya emitted a bitter laugh. Even those that are baseless. Especially baseless ones, he affirmed. Those present the least risk. She sat down slowly. Hayes leaned back. Your attainment of the first position in your class was tolerated for approximately 12 hours before an individual determined the outcome to be unacceptable. Maya's jaw tightened. So, what transpires next? They will examine your examination papers, compare your handwriting, review testing surveillance footage, and interview faculty members. He slid the document towards her. A futile endeavor, but a humiliating one, which is likely the intended purpose. Maya gazed at the complaint, then inquired softly, Do you believe these events are connected to the previous threats? Hayes did not respond immediately. Finally, he stated, I believe individuals who resent being outmaneuvered often develop a peculiar ingenuity. The investigation spanned 9 arduous days. 9 days of instructors subtly observing her, 9 days of students whispering behind her back, 9 days of her feigning indifference when people's gazes lingered upon her as if she might be culpable. Even students who harbored a degree of affection for her exhibited an awkward reticence, not openly accusatory, but cautious, for scandal had a tendency to transform many individuals into cowards. Then, on the 10th day, the findings were disclosed. No evidence of misconduct, no irregularities detected, no indication of cheating, a complete academic exoneration. The institution communicated the outcome via email. No apology was offered, no public rectification was issued, merely a sterile administrative note that cleared her name in private after suspicion had already been disseminated publicly. Maya read it once, then closed her laptop. Evelyn observed from the opposite side of the kitchen. Well? Maya handed her the screen. Evelyn read it, then looked up slowly. That's it? That's all? They subject your name to public opprobrium for 10 days and then dispatch a single inconsequential email. Maya nodded. Evelyn firmly closed the laptop. That's precisely how they operate, she declared with a touch of bitterness. They amplify the accusation and then minimize the apology. Maya stared at the table. Indeed. But even as the institution absolved her, a subtle shift was occurring. An increasing number of professors began to take notice of her, not solely for her academic performance, but for her innate intuition, her persuasive argumentation, and the unique way she perceived the law, not as an abstract theoretical construct, but as a system with tangible consequences. Professor Hayes extended an invitation for her to participate in an advanced trial advocacy workshop, an opportunity typically reserved for students in their later academic years. 2 other faculty members recommended her for consideration in competitive moot court. A retired judge serving as a guest lecturer in criminal procedure interrupted the class midway through a discussion and openly declared, Miss Williams, if you continue to present arguments with such acuity, some unfortunate district attorney is going to find themselves thoroughly disliking you one day. The students chuckled. Maya offered a polite smile, yet an underlying resentment deepened, for she was no longer merely surviving. She was becoming conspicuously visible, and conspicuous excellence in an individual deemed unsuitable possessed the unsettling ability to render insecure individuals dangerously unpredictable. This realization became particularly acute after an evening practice session for the advocacy workshop. Maya lingered late, assisting with the rearrangement of the mock courtroom. By the time she departed, the majority of the campus had emptied. She had just reached the parking area when she detected hurried footsteps approaching from behind her. Turning swiftly, she observed 3 male students, all second-year attendees, considerably larger than herself, and each sporting a smug expression. One of them, Brett Holloway, the son of a prominent local attorney, stepped forward. "Relax," he stated. "We merely wish to converse." Maya remained stationary. "About what?" Brett shrugged nonchalantly. "About how rather amusing it is that a girl from obscurity suddenly presumes she's superior to everyone else." Maya's voice maintained its composure. "Move aside." Another boy guffawed. "Still retaining that courtroom bravado, are we?" Brett advanced closer. "You comprehend your fundamental flaw?" Maya remained silent. "You lack the capacity for gratitude." Her eyes narrowed imperiously. He gestured towards the law building. "This establishment granted you admission. Those instructors bestow upon you their attention, and instead of demonstrating a modicum of humility, you comport yourself as if you rightfully belong here." Maya's countenance hardened demonstrably. "I do belong here." That declaration rendered all 3 of them momentarily silent. Then Brett smiled slowly, a menacing glint in his eyes. "No," he said, "you merely encountered good fortune." Maya subtly shifted her bag, preparing herself. Brett leaned in conspiratorially. "Young women such as yourself experience a singular moment of prominence and then erroneously assume that the established rules no longer apply to them." He then lowered his voice. "They have not changed." Maya stepped forward until they were nearly chest to chest, then spoke in a voice so quiet only they could discern it. "Then perhaps you should exert greater effort," she stated, "because if the rules remain unchanged and I am still surpassing you—" She allowed the sentence to hang in the air. The insult landed with significant force. Brett's face contorted for a fleeting instant. Maya entertained the possibility that he might resort to physical assault. Another voice then cut through the stillness of the lot. "Is that sufficient, gentlemen?" Professor Hayes. He stood near the building's entrance, a coat draped over one arm, observing the scene. The young men recoiled immediately. Brett, forcing a semblance of a smile, offered, "We were merely engaging in conversation." Hayes regarded him with a chilling gaze, then advised, "Learn to do so while departing." The trio departed without uttering another word. Hayes waited until they were out of earshot, then turned his attention to Maya. "Are you quite all right?" She nodded. He studied her intently, then stated quietly, "This situation will likely escalate." Maya blinked in surprise. "What do you mean?" "The more formidable you become, the more overtly insecure men will resent you." He paused. "You must grasp this fact now." She exhaled slowly. "I am weary of perpetually having to prove that I belong." Hayes nodded in understanding. "You will never cease to be required to prove it to certain individuals." That unvarnished truth settled heavily between them. Then he added, "However, eventually, should you continue to achieve victory, their opinions will cease to hold greater significance than your accumulated record." The semester progressed. Maya participated in her inaugural moot court competition. She was the youngest entrant, possessed the least formal training, and was the sole student present who was still engaged in night work and relying on public transport for her commute home. She advanced through successive rounds, and when the final results were posted, she emerged victorious once more. That evening, back at her residence, Evelyn stood in the kitchen, holding the trophy as if it were crafted from solid gold. Mrs. Green wept even before Maya had concluded her explanation. Reverend Price laughed so heartily that he had to remove his spectacles. "She is accumulating triumphs at a pace surpassing that of church ladies gathering gossip." Even Maya found herself laughing, but later, after everyone had departed. By the midpoint of her second academic year, Maya Williams had become an undeniable presence. Her name graced every academic honor list. Professors utilized her written arguments as exemplary models in their lectures. Students who had once whispered now fell silent upon her entrance into a room, not necessarily out of profound respect, but because the pretense that she was an anomaly had become demonstrably embarrassing. Yet some among them persisted in their efforts. The announcement arrived on a Monday morning. The institution had selected 4 students for the highly prestigious State Trial Advocacy Invitational, a competition attended by law firms, judges, prosecutors, and legal recruiters from across the entire state of Illinois. Maya's name appeared first on the roster. Brett Holloway's name did not. By noon, the news had spread like wildfire. By 2 p.m., the backlash had begun. She was selected solely for diversity quotas. She has become their public relations mascot. There is no conceivable way they would choose her over individuals with established legal lineage. Maya disregarded the cacophony until she entered Professor Hayes's office and discovered him reading a letter with palpable disgust. "What has transpired?" she inquired. He held it aloft. Another anonymous complaint, this time alleging that Maya received preferential treatment from faculty members due to the public attention surrounding her courthouse incident and that her selection for the invitational reflects bias rather than merit. Maya stared in disbelief. They truly cannot tolerate losing, can they? Hayes dropped the letter into the waste bin. No, they cannot. He leaned forward. Listen very carefully. This competition is significant. Maya nodded. Recruiters will be present. Judges will be in attendance. Those present in that chamber possess the capacity to pivot their professional trajectories before even embarking on them. He fixed his gaze upon her intently. Therefore, if anyone among them harbors hopes of your defeat, let them observe with utmost diligence. The preceding weeks of rigorous preparation had been exceedingly arduous. 12-hour practice sessions daily, simulated cross-examinations, drills involving evidence handling, and intensive training in rapid-fire objection techniques. Professor Hayes meticulously dissected every faltering response, every moment of indecision, every superfluous utterance. She attempted it again, her repetition slow. Too sluggish. She tried once more. Your objection lacked persuasive force. This repeated over and over until her voice grew hoarse, until her limbs ached, until the very core of her mind felt raw and abraded. One evening, following a practice session, Maya slumped into a chair, murmuring, "At this juncture, I suspect you harbor a dislike for me." Professor Hayes did not even deign to look up. "No," he stated. "My aim is to ensure that no one within this room can endure being underestimated by you." That assertion provided her with the fortitude to navigate the subsequent week. The morning of the competition dawned. The event was convened in the heart of Chicago within the confines of a historical courthouse annex. Aspiring legal scholars from the state's most prestigious institutions congregated in the lobby, impeccably attired in tailored suits, their confidence polished to a gleam. Many were the progeny of legal professionals, judges, and senior partners, individuals whose very names served as passports to opportunity. Maya arrived bearing a single borrowed blazer, a briefcase procured from a second-hand establishment, and the accumulated weight of every individual who had ever harbored doubts about her resting quietly within her ribcage. She perceived it instantaneously. Judge Harold Whitmore stood adjacent to the registration desk, engaged in conversation with 2 senior attorneys. He noticed her at the very same instant. His facial expression altered only marginally, yet it was sufficient. Maya faltered for a fraction of a second before continuing her advance. Whitmore observed her as she passed, remaining silent, but his eyes tracked her movement. Professor Hayes materialized beside her. Moments later, I observed him. Maya maintained a neutral countenance. Naturally, he would be present. Hayes's voice lowered. He is serving as one of the guest evaluators. Mia released a single slow exhalation. Perfect. Of all the venues in Illinois. It was inevitable that fate would place her in a setting where she would be judged by the very man she had previously disgraced. Hayes studied her. "Would you prefer that I request a change in assignment?" Maya turned to face him. "No." He gave a single nod. "Excellent." The preliminary rounds commenced. Maya systematically dismantled her initial adversary in less than 20 minutes. Subsequently, she defeated the second, then the third. With each successive round, the same pattern emerged. The opposing counsel, entering the fray with an excess of self-assurance, subsequently underestimated her and ultimately suffered defeat. Whispers began to circulate throughout the event by lunchtime. That is Maya Williams. She is formidable. She does not appear to be the least bit apprehensive. By the time the semi-final round arrived, spectators had crowded the observation room. Word had disseminated. The courthouse student, the one featured in the viral narrative, the black student who consistently bested every opponent placed before her, she advanced to the finals, and as she entered the final courtroom, she paused. Judge Whitmore occupied the central evaluation seat, directly facing her, observing intently. The entire room sensed it immediately. Everyone was aware of the history. Even if not every particular detail was known, the general gist was apparent. The final round began. Her opponent was polished, confident, and technically proficient. He hailed from an elite private schooling background and moved with the assurance of someone who had never once questioned his entitlement to occupy such spaces. For 20 minutes, the round remained closely contested. Then came the cross-examination, and Maya revealed a ruthless streak. She systematically dismantled the witness, cornered him with inconsistencies, forced him into contradictions, and exerted such complete control over the proceedings that even the spectators began to lean forward. Her opponent started to perspire, then to falter, and ultimately to unravel. By the time the closing arguments were presented, the outcome was evident. Maya delivered her final statement with unruffled precision. No ostentatious displays, no wasted movements, only facts, structure, and undeniable force. When she concluded, a profound silence descended, followed by an eruption of applause. The judges retired for deliberation. Maya stood alone outside the chamber, her hands clasped tightly behind her back. Professor Hayes approached. "You already know." She looked at him. "Know what?" "You are the victor." She made a concerted effort not to smile. Then the judges reappeared. Everyone re-entered the room. The head evaluator stepped to the podium. By unanimous decision, a deliberate pause. "The recipient of this year's State Trial Advocacy Invitational is Miss Maya Williams." The room erupted. Applause, tears, and a chorus of murmurs. Someone in the rear exclaimed, "Naturally, she would be." Maya exhaled forcefully for a brief moment. Emotion threatened to overwhelm her composure. She then stepped forward, accepted the plaque, and shook hands with each evaluator. As she reached Whitmore, he did not immediately release her hand. His smile was strained, meticulously polite, and forced. He then leaned in just enough for her to perceive his words. "You take pleasure in humiliating individuals of a lower standing than yourself." Maya met his gaze and responded softly. "No, Your Honor," she corrected, adopting a pose. "I take pleasure in demonstrating that they were never of a higher standing to begin with." His fingers instantly disengaged from hers. The smile vanished. That evening, the news of her triumph spread with far greater rapidity than the courthouse incident had ever managed. Law firms contacted the institution, requesting interviews. Professors forwarded congratulatory messages. Students who had previously offered sneers now attempted, with evident awkwardness, to introduce themselves. Brett Holloway maintained complete silence in her presence. 3 days later, Maya was summoned to the dean's office. She entered with the expectation of receiving commendations. Instead, Dean Eleanor Whitaker sat behind her desk, her hands folded, her expression grave. "Miss Williams," she stated. "Please be seated." Maya complied. Whitaker slid a document across the desk. "Kindly read the heading. Formal Ethics Review Inquiry." Her stomach plummeted. The dean spoke with deliberate care. A formal complaint has been lodged, alleging that your conduct toward a guest evaluator at the competition was hostile, unprofessional, and threatening. Mia stared at her, then slowly raised her gaze. Judge Whitmore. Whitaker offered no reply. It was not necessary. Mia leaned back, emitting a single disbelieving laugh. He lost, and now I am deemed unethical. Whitaker's expression softened slightly. I'm conveying this to you in confidence because I believe you warrant prior notification. Maya grew still. The dean leaned forward. There exist individuals within this profession who will never forgive being embarrassed by someone they perceive as beneath them. The stark reality of her situation struck her with the force of a physical blow. Whitaker continued, You possess exceptional talent, Miss Williams. Truly outstanding. A pause. And that talent renders you a source of apprehension to the wrong sort of people. Mia's jaw tightened. What transpires next? Whitaker folded her hands. The ethics review hearing has been scheduled for the following Thursday. Not in a classroom, not before an audience of students, no applause, merely a private conference room. 3 faculty members, Dean Whitaker, and a complaint filed by an individual of sufficient influence to compel the institution to treat it with seriousness. Maya entered, maintaining the same placid demeanor she had cultivated for herself whenever apprehension threatened to manifest. Within, Professor Hayes was already present. She frowned. You are here. He adjusted his spectacles. Faculty advisor privilege. I requested to observe. This revelation surprised her. He lowered his voice. You have earned the support of at least one individual within this institution who is prepared to stand by you when they target you. Something within Maya's chest tightened. The hearing commenced without preamble. The complaint was read aloud. It alleged that Maya had exhibited a hostile demeanor, engaged in aggressive verbal conduct, and displayed a threatening posture toward Judge Harold Whitmore during the State Trial Advocacy Invitational. It further contended that her conduct demonstrated a disturbing pattern of disrespect toward judicial authority and raised significant questions concerning her professional temperament. Maya almost laughed, not out of amusement, but because the transparency of the accusation was so blatant. Dean Whitaker folded her hands. Miss Williams, how do you respond to these allegations? Mia sat up straighter. I deny each and every one. One faculty reviewer inquired, Did you make a statement to Judge Whitmore subsequent to receiving your award? Yes. What did you say? Maya responded without hesitation. He informed me that I enjoyed humiliating individuals above my station. I replied that I enjoyed demonstrating that they were never above it to begin with. A brief pause. Then, one reviewer blinked. Another attempted to conceal the nascent smile at the corner of their lips. Dean Whitaker remained impassive. Did you threaten him? No. Did you raise your voice? No. Did you employ profanity? No. Did you engage in physical contact beyond a handshake? No. Another pause. Then, the youngest reviewer, a woman named Professor Elaine Ross, placed the complaint file on the table. So, to summarize, she stated carefully, a sitting judge has lodged a formal ethical concern because a student responded to an insult with an assertion of her own worth. Silence. No one offered a reply, for that was precisely the essence of the matter. Dean Whitaker closed the folder. This review finds no evidence of ethical misconduct. Maya exhaled softly, but the dean was not yet finished. She looked directly at Maya. However, Mia's shoulders tensed. Whitaker's voice sharpened. You should be aware that the events that have transpired here today will recur in various forms throughout your professional career. Maya remained silent. Power seldom openly admits to acts of reprisal. It cloaks itself in the guise of professionalism, decorum, concern, policy, temperament, and standards. The room became still. Whitaker leaned forward. Learn to distinguish between constructive criticism and intimidation. Maya nodded slowly. I will. The review concluded. No penalty, no warning, no disciplinary action. Another attempt to undermine her had been weathered, but by this point, Maya comprehended the recurring pattern. Each time she ascended, someone endeavored to push her back down. That afternoon, as she exited the law school building, a black sedan pulled to the curb beside her. The rear window descended. Denise Porter was seated inside. Maya blinked. "Denise, get in!" Maya hesitated. Denise's expression was one of urgency. "Now!" Maya entered. The car began to move. "What's wrong?" Denise glanced at the driver, an older gentleman Maya did not recognize before responding. "My cousin works in judicial administration." Mia's stomach tightened. "He overheard something yesterday." Mia waited. Denise's voice dropped to a near whisper. "Judge Whitmore is making inquiries regarding your eligibility for future bar admission." Maya grew cold. "What?" "He is laying the groundwork." The word struck her like a physical blow. Denise continued. "He is informing individuals that you are unstable, arrogant, and dangerous, and that your temperament renders you unfit for legal practice." Maya stared straight ahead. "He is attempting to poison the well before I even graduate." Denise nodded grimly. "He intends to ruin your reputation before your career even begins." Silence filled the car. Then Maya asked quietly, "Why is he undertaking all of this?" Denise looked at her for a prolonged moment, then responded with unvarnished honesty. "Because you caused him to feel insignificant in public, and men of his disposition would sooner destroy a woman than endure humiliation." Maya gazed out the window, her jaw clenched so tightly it ached. By the time she reached home, Evelyn instantly discerned that something was amiss. "What has happened?" Maya recounted the entire sequence of events to her. The ethics hearing, the rumors, Whitmore's persistent campaign. Evelyn listened in silence, then sat down heavily. Her face appeared older than it had that morning. "This man is attempting to exact retribution for the rest of your life." Maya nodded. Reverend Price, who had stopped by for dinner, leaned forward. "Then we must prepare ourselves now." Maya frowned. "Prepare for what?" "For the day he attempts something more significant." That day arrived sooner than anyone anticipated. 2 months later, Mia secured the most highly sought-after summer internship within her graduating class, a clerkship with one of Chicago's most esteemed civil rights litigation firms. The announcement was made public through the institution. Faculty members offered their congratulations. Students regarded it with outright disbelief. Brett Holloway openly muttered, "Naturally, she secured the activist firm." Maya disregarded him for precisely 48 hours. Then, the offer was rescinded. No explanation was provided, only a brief email. "Following further review, we are unable to proceed with your placement at this time." Maya contacted them immediately. No response. She sent an email. No reply. Finally, after 2 days, a junior recruiter agreed to speak with her privately. His voice was strained. "I am not authorized to disclose this information to you." Maya gripped the phone tighter. "Then why are you?" A pause. "Because what happened to you is fundamentally wrong." Her pulse thrummed. "Tell me," he exhaled. "A judge contacted one of the senior partners." Everything within her went still. "He issued a warning. You were confrontational, unstable, difficult to supervise, and posed a reputational risk." Maya closed her eyes. "Whitmore, again." The recruiter's voice lowered. "I am deeply sorry." The line went dead. Maya stood motionless in the kitchen for nearly a full minute. Then she carefully placed the phone down. Evelyn watched her. "What is it?" Mia's voice emerged flat. "He rescinded the internship offer." Silence. Reverend Price stood slowly. Mrs. Green, seated nearby, covered her mouth. Evelyn rose. "What did you say?" Maya repeated the statement verbatim. By the conclusion, Evelyn was trembling with righteous indignation. "That wicked man is attempting to ruin your life because he cannot bear to witness your ascent." Maya remained silent, for if she were to open her mouth too quickly, she feared she might unleash a scream. Instead, she walked to the sink, braced both hands against the counter, and stared straight ahead. Her reflection in the dark window appeared to be that of someone far older than 24, weary, incensed, and completely devoid of surprise. Behind her, Reverend Price spoke quietly. "Then he is afraid." Maya emitted a single sharp laugh. "He ought to be." Everyone turned. She faced them, her eyes blazing, her voice low. "He believes that by closing enough doors, I will eventually cease to knock." No one spoke. Mia took one breath, then another, and then declared, "He made a grave error." Evelyn stared at her. "What error?" Mia's voice hardened into something far colder than mere anger. "He has demonstrated precisely the kind of lawyer I must endeavor to become." Silence. She looked down at the internship withdrawal email, then deleted it. "He seeks to wield power to crush individuals discreetly," she stated. "Excellent." She looked up. "And one day I will build a career dedicated to dismantling the power held by men like him." The following morning, Maya Williams awoke with a sense of clarity she had not experienced in months. Not peace, not comfort, but absolute clarity. Judge Harold Whitmore had intercepted her internship offer. He had disseminated falsehoods concerning her character. He had extended his influence beyond the courtroom and into her future because he believed no one would ever dare to challenge him for it. That belief, Maya resolved, would become his undoing. She entered Professor Hayes' office before his first class commenced. He looked up once and immediately grasped the situation. "What has occurred?" Maya shut the door behind her. "Whitmore had my internship offer revoked." Hayes' expression hardened. "How do you know?" She explained the phone call, the warning, the partner's private admission. When she finished, Hayes leaned back slowly, then uttered the words she least expected. "Good." Maya stared. "Excuse me?" His voice remained calm. "Good. He has just sabotaged my career." "No," Hayes stated. "He has escalated the conflict. He has moved beyond indirect pressure." He stood, walked around the desk, and lowered his voice. "Up to this point, Whitmore has harassed you through rumor, veiled threats, intimidation, and institutional whispers. These are difficult to substantiate, easy to deny, my dear." He paused, but if he is now directly interfering with your professional placements, he held her gaze. Then, inevitably, he will commit a mistake significant enough to be formally documented. Something shifted behind Maya's eyes. Hayes continued, "You do not defeat men of that ilk by lodging complaints of foul play too soon." He pointed at her. "You defeat them by allowing their arrogance to convince them of their own invincibility." Silence. Then Maya understood. "He believes he can continue to push because no one stops him." Hayes nodded. "So, let him push further." Her jaw tightened. "And when he crosses the line," Hayes' voice turned to steel, "then you bury him with his own transgressions." This became the established strategy. No outbursts, no public accusations, no emotional retaliation, meticulous documentation, every peculiar email, every withdrawn opportunity, every veiled threat, every witness, every pertinent date. Denise Porter quietly furnished her with information whenever feasible. Reverend Price connected her with a civil rights attorney prepared to offer discreet counsel. Professor Hayes meticulously documented every suspicious institutional complaint lodged against her. For months, Mia remained silent, and Whitmore grew increasingly audacious. By the time of her graduation, Mia had once again attained the top academic rank within her class. By then, she had evolved into something more significant than merely a student. She was a recognized name. Faculty members invited her to participate in academic symposia. Students sought her out for academic assistance. Even younger black students on campus began to quietly emulate her example. That heightened visibility rendered Whitmore more reckless. He began to speak openly against her at legal networking events. Numerous attorneys reported hearing him characterize her as combative and unstable, a courtroom embarrassment in waiting. Then came the critical error. A prestigious Chicago public interest legal fellowship extended an invitation to Maya for final round interviews. One of the members of the selection committee was a retired appellate judge named Howard Bennett, respected, well-connected, and sufficiently insulated from Whitmore's influence not to harbor fear. 3 days after Mia's interview, Bennett contacted her personally. His voice was grave. "Miss Williams, I need to pose a direct question to you." Maya sat straighter. "Of course. Has Judge Whitmore been involved in ongoing issues with you?" Her pulse spiked. "Yes." A pause. Then Bennett stated, "He contacted me yesterday." Silence. Maya's fingers tightened on the phone. "What did he say?" Bennett's tone sharpened. "He advised me not to hire you. He claimed you lacked professionalism and posed a threat to legal decorum." Maya closed her eyes. There it was. At last, irrefutable evidence. Bennett continued, "I informed him that this fellowship selects candidates based on merit, not on hearsay." A breath. "Then he suggested that I would regret associating with you." Maya remained completely still. Bennett's voice lowered. "Miss Williams, if my suspicions are accurate, this is not professional advice. This is retaliation." Her throat tightened. "Yes, sir." Another pause. Then Bennett said quietly, "I do not tolerate the abuse of judicial office." Maya's entire body went rigid. He continued, "I have documented this conversation. Should you choose to pursue this matter formally, I will provide testimony for several seconds." Maya was rendered speechless. Then, "Thank you." She ended the call and immediately contacted Hayes, then Denise, then Reverend Price, and finally the civil rights attorney who had been awaiting Whitmore's overreach for months. The attorney's name was Carolyn Mercer, sharp, formidable, and renowned for dismantling powerful men through sophisticated discourse. She arrived at Maya's residence that evening, carrying a legal pad and wearing an expression that suggested she had detected the scent of blood. She listened intently to every detail: the courtroom humiliation, the ethics complaints, the internship sabotage, the whispered rumors, the explicit threats, the interference with the fellowship application. Then she looked up. "How much of this can we corroborate?" Maya handed her the folder, now a substantial binder, every incident meticulously documented, every witness identified, every date logged. Caroline slowly smiled. "Oh," she murmured softly, "this imbecile truly believed you would not prepare." Maya responded with a flat tone, "He underestimated me first in court." Caroline nodded. "And now he has made the same mistake again." She closed the binder. "We will file a complaint with the Judicial Conduct Commission." The room fell silent. Even Evelyn inhaled sharply. Reverend Price whispered, "Lord." Caroline's eyes gleamed. "We will allege abuse of office, retaliatory misconduct, professional interference, and unethical misuse of judicial authority." Maya stared at her, and if they attempt to suppress it, Caroline smiled without humor. "Then we will take it public." For the first time in nearly 2 years, Mia felt the tide of events begin to turn, not emotionally, but strategically. Whitmore was no longer a hunter operating from the shadows. He had left tangible evidence. The complaint was filed within the week, discreetly, formally, and directly. For 12 days, nothing transpired. Then, on the 13th day, the story broke. Confidential misconduct complaint filed against Cook County judge. The article spread instantaneously. Whitmore publicly denied all allegations, dismissing them as desperate fabrications by a disgruntled student. Then, the commission announced that witnesses would be interviewed, including Denise Porter, Professor Hayes, retired Judge Howard Bennett, numerous legal recruiters, and several attorneys from public events. The legal community erupted as people began to speak openly, initially in hushed tones, then with increasing volume. Stories surfaced: former law clerk, junior attorneys, court staff, other incidents, other acts of retaliation, other whispered accusations, not all as severe, but collectively forming a discernible pattern. Whitmore had for years exploited his authority with impunity because no individual of consequence had ever compelled him to face accountability until now. 3 nights later, Maya sat in her kitchen, engrossed in the latest publication, when her telephone rang. An unknown number. She answered. Silence. Then, the voice of Whitmore, laced with a controlled, simmering fury. You have committed a grave error. Maya's posture immediately straightened. No, she replied calmly. You did. His breathing became more ragged. You believe a single complaint will ruin me? No, she rose slowly. I believe your own conduct will. He chuckled bitterly. You presumptuous girl. No, Maya interjected, her voice hardening to ice. Not a girl anymore. A pause hung in the air. Then she uttered the words she had been anticipating for years. You taught me how men like you wield power when no one challenges them. Aza. Well, now someone is. His voice descended to a low hiss. You have no conception of what you have unleashed. Maya responded instantly. Yes, I do. She terminated the call, placing her phone down. The room remained hushed. Evelyn regarded her intently, then whispered, Bab. Maya turned. Her grandmother's eyes welled with tears. Not fear, pride. You truly went after him. Maya offered a single nod. No. Her voice was quiet, resolute. He came after me outside that residence. The city vibrated with scandal. Jurists murmured, attorneys theorized, journalists investigated, and for the first time since that pivotal courtroom day, Judge Harold Whitmore found himself the subject of scrutiny, the one under examination, the one beginning to comprehend the sensation of power, failing to shield one from accountability. And Maya Williams, the unassuming black student he had belittled from the rear of the chamber, had become the catalyst for his world's unraveling. The hearing before the Judicial Conduct Commission was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. No recording devices were permitted, no public observers, yet half the legal fraternity in Chicago seemed aware of its proceedings. Maya Williams stood outside the hearing chamber, clad in a navy suit, alone from Mrs. Green's niece, her hands steady at her sides, her expression inscrutable. Beside her stood Caroline Mercer, a thick binder beneath one arm, the focused intensity of a warrior prepared for victory. Are you anxious? Caroline inquired. Maya answered with unvarnished honesty. Yes. Caroline nodded. Good. Anxiety signifies an understanding of the gravity of the situation. Across the corridor, Judge Harold Whitmore emerged with his legal counsel. He retained the same polished arrogance that had always defined him. Yet a subtle shift had occurred in his countenance. The self-assurance had evaporated. He appeared sterner now, more irate, less like a man in control, and more like one desperately clinging to authority. His gaze met Maya's, fixed. He walked past her without a word. Caroline leaned closer and murmured, He resembles a man realizing walls can indeed crumble. The hearing spanned nearly 6 hours. Witness after witness presented their testimony. Denise Porter recounted the events in the courtroom on the day Ma protected Evelyn's home. She repeated Whitmore's derisive remarks verbatim. She detailed the racial undertones, the mockery, and the subsequent retaliation. Professor Hayes testified next. He elaborated on the questionable ethical complaints, the anonymous academic allegations, and the persistent endeavors to impede Mia's professional progression following Whitmore's public humiliation. Then, Judge Howard Bennett took the stand. His testimony proved to be a turning point. He recounted Whitmore's phone call with meticulous accuracy. The warning, the disparagement, the threat. When Bennett repeated Whitmore's exact words, "You will regret associating with her." The room fell into a profound silence, for coming from a retired appellate judge with an impeccable reputation, it utterly demolished Whitmore's defense. However, the true unraveling commenced when Caroline presented corroborating statements from 3 additional attorneys. Each described analogous experiences, Whitmore privately advising firms against hiring candidates he disapproved of, Whitmore penalizing lawyers who challenged him in court, Whitmore retaliating against individuals who publicly embarrassed him. The pattern was incontrovertible. Now there was no room for misinterpretation, no isolated incident, but a systemic pattern of abuse. Whitmore eventually testified in his own behalf. He denied all allegations. He asserted that Maya had fabricated the accusations out of spite. He claimed the witnesses had misinterpreted his intentions. He argued that his professional concerns had been distorted into a conspiracy. Then, Caroline rose for cross-examination and systematically dismantled his assertions with ethical precision and bold conviction. She guided him through each denial, then each contradiction, then each witness statement, then each documented interaction. By the conclusion, Whitmore's composure began to fracture. His voice escalated. He snapped at the commissioners, evaded direct questions, and contradicted his own prior statements on 2 occasions. Then came the final misstep. Caroline posed the question, "Did you or did you not state to Judge Bennett that Miss Williams would represent a reputational hazard to any institution that employed her?" Whitmore slammed his hand on the table. "I was endeavoring to safeguard this profession from devolving into a spectacle orchestrated by overbearing activists who believe talent excuses insubordination." Silence. Absolute, deafening silence. Because everyone in that chamber comprehended his true underlying sentiment. Not professionalism, not ethics, not concern, but resentment, ego, and contempt. One commissioner leaned forward slowly. "Judge Whitmore, are you referring to Miss Williams?" Whitmore realized his error far too late. His expression shifted, but the damage was irrevocable. Caroline resumed her seat. She required no further questions. 2 weeks later, the verdict was delivered. Judge Harold Whitmore was formally stripped of his judicial office. His license for judicial conduct was rescinded. His disciplinary findings were published. A recommendation for further review of prior retaliatory judgments was initiated. The legal community was galvanized. News outlets covered the story for days, with headlines such as "Chicago Judge Removed Following Retaliation Findings," "Misconduct Panel Confirms Abuse of Power," and "Law Student's Complaint Topples Sitting Judge." But the headline that resonated most profoundly was a simpler one. "The girl he mocked brought him down." Maya attempted to disregard the extensive coverage, but she failed. Her phone was incessantly ringing. Interview solicitations, offers from legal organizations, civil rights groups, recruiters. The very profession that had once whispered warnings about her now clamored for meetings, for lunches, for introductions, eager to be associated with the woman who had accomplished what no one else had dared. One evening, Maya sat at her kitchen table while Evelyn perused the newspaper for the 3rd time. Her grandmother shook her head in disbelief. "He has truly lost everything." Maya nodded. "Yes." Evelyn carefully folded the paper, then turned to her granddaughter. "Do you feel better?" The question caught Maya off guard. She contemplated it, recalling the courtroom, the threats, the lost internship, the sleepless nights, the years of humiliation and pressure, then responded honestly. "No." Evelyn's brow furrowed. "No?" Maya shook her head slowly. "I feel finished. Asa, he can't hurt me anymore." Evelyn's gaze softened. Then she smiled. "That's peace, baby. It just doesn't always arrive with a gentle demeanor." Graduation arrived a month later. The auditorium was filled to capacity. Families, faculty, students. Maya graduated at the pinnacle of her class. When her name was announced for valedictorian honors, the assembled crowd rose before she even reached the podium. A standing ovation. Not polite, not brief, but thunderous. She stood at the podium, her gaze sweeping across the room, acknowledging the professors who had believed in her, the classmates who had once doubted her, the students behind her who now understood what was achievable because she existed. Then her eyes found Evelyn in the front row, openly weeping, hands clasped, looking at her as one regards answered prayers. Maya began her speech with a simple premise. The law is often described as blind. The room fell silent. She continued, but sometimes The truth is more discerning than that. A pause. Sometimes the law perceives precisely who you are. Her eyes scan the room and treats you accordingly. Silence. She spoke of power, of systems, of the distinction between legality and justice, of how institutions become perilous when virtuous individuals fear confronting them. Then she concluded with a statement that would later be quoted in newspapers across the state. Justice does not falter because evil is complex. Justice falters because too many decent people opt for silence over courage. The audience erupted. People stood again. Even faculty members wiped away tears. Afterward, as the crowd congregated around her, Professor Hayes approached quietly. He handed her a sealed envelope. "What is this?" she asked. She opened it. Inside was an offer letter. Bennett and Cole Civil Rights Litigation Group, one of the most esteemed litigation firms in the state. A partner-sponsored full associate track upon passing the bar. Prestige beyond anything she had previously imagined. Maya stared, then looked up. Hayes offered a rare smile. Judge Bennett insisted. Her eyes immediately welled up. He remembered what Whitmore had said. Hayes nodded, indicating that he had decided to build the future rather than protect the past. Maya clutched the letter to her chest. Across the room, Evelyn watched her and began to cry anew. Later that night, long after the celebration had concluded, Maya stood alone on the front porch of the house they had almost lost. The same house, the same steps, the same worn railing. Yet now, everything felt altered. Evelyn joined her outside. Neither spoke for a considerable time. Then Evelyn said softly, "Do you know what your mother used to say about you?" Maya looked over. She said, "One day, you'll make powerful people uneasy." Maya laughed, tears welling. She was right. Evelyn smiled. "No, baby." She reached for Mia's hand. "She underestimated you too." And as Maya stood there, clutching the job offer that would launch her legal career, she fully comprehended the truth for the first time. Judge Harold Whitmore had attempted to conclude her narrative the day he ridiculed her in court. Instead, 3 months after her graduation, Maya Williams stood once more in a real courtroom. This time, no one laughed when she entered. No one smirked at her attire. No one questioned her belonging. No one mistook her for an observer, because now her name was clearly inscribed on the counsel table. Maya Williams, Associate Attorney. She ran her fingers once across the engraved plate before sitting down, not out of vanity, but from remembrance, for she vividly recalled the sensation of standing in the back of a courtroom, while individuals scoffed at the notion of her ever belonging at the front. Opposite her sat the city's legal counsel. Beside her sat Caroline Mercer, now not merely a mentor, but a colleague. Caroline leaned over. "Are you ready?" Maya nodded. "Yes." Caroline studied her, then smiled. "Good, because after today, everyone in this building will know your name for reasons entirely unrelated to Whitmore. The case involved a wrongful housing seizure. An elderly black veteran had narrowly escaped losing his home after city inspectors manipulated violations to expedite seizure proceedings for redevelopment interests. When the file landed on Maya's desk, she had examined it for less than 5 minutes before stating, "I want this one," because she recognized that narrative. Different details, same cruelty. The hearing lasted 4 hours. Maya argued with precision, with force, with restraint. No drama, no theatrics, simply law. By the time she concluded, the judge had ruled entirely in their favor. The veteran retained his home, and as the court adjourned, the old man took Mia's hands in both of his and whispered, his eyes filled with tears, "They told me nobody would fight for people like me anymore." Mia squeezed his hands. They lied. That victory marked the first of many. Within a year, Maya had established a reputation, not merely as brilliant, not simply as fearless, but as dangerous. Dangerous to corrupt officials, dangerous to institutions that relied on the silence of the impoverished, dangerous to anyone who mistook procedure for justice. Clients began requesting her by name. Young attorneys sought her mentorship. Law students quoted her graduation speech in classrooms. and wherever she went, people repeated the same narrative. She was the woman who had once risen from the back row and refused to sit down, but success never altered what mattered most. Every Friday evening, regardless of her workload, Maya drove back to South Aberdeen Street. She brought groceries, checked medications, and repaired whatever in the house needed attention. And every Friday, Evelyn still pretended Mia was doing too much. One night, nearly 2 years after that initial courtroom confrontation, they sat together at the kitchen table. The same house, the same chairs, the same aged walls, but now framed newspaper articles adorned the space alongside family photographs. Headlines read, "Young attorney secures landmark civil rights case," and "Former law student emerges as rising star in Chicago litigation." Evelyn read them all as if each were sacred scripture. Then she carefully folded one and said, "Do you know what I love most?" Maya smiled. "That I defeated important people?" "No." Evelyn shook her head. "That you never became cruel after learning how the world operates." The words struck her, quietly, profoundly, because Maya had indeed felt the temptation to harden, to become sharp enough never to be wounded again, to confuse justice with vengeance, but she had battled that impulse as well. Months later, Maya received an invitation to speak at a legal reform conference downtown. She accepted. Only upon her arrival did she learn that one of the panelists had unexpectedly withdrawn, and the moderator had invited someone else to fill the vacancy. Former Judge Harold Whitmore. Maya froze upon seeing his name. The room fell silent around them as he entered. He appeared older, graying in ways he hadn't before. Public disgrace had diminished him in some way. People whispered as he approached. He saw her immediately and stopped for a long moment. Neither spoke. Then Whitmore stepped closer. His voice was softer than she remembered. "Miss Williams." She met his gaze. "Former judge." A flicker of pain crossed his face. He nodded once. "I suppose I earned that silence." Then, unexpectedly, he said, "You won." Maya studied him. "No," she replied quietly. "The truth did." He offered a wry smile. "You still speak like that." She did not respond. Whitmore looked away briefly, then said something she never expected to hear. "I resented you because you revealed what I had become." Maya's eyes narrowed slightly. He continued before she could speak. "You walked into my courtroom and compelled me to see myself through the eyes of others." His voice was heavy now. Most men would sooner shatter the mirror than confront the reflection. The candor of his admission stunned her. Whitmore exhaled. "I was one of them." He straightened, then added quietly, "For what it's worth, you were right to pursue me." And just like that, he walked away. Maya stood motionless. Not because his words erased anything. They did not. Not because forgiveness came swiftly. It did not. But because hearing a man like that acknowledge the truth, even partially, felt like the final closing of a wound she had carried for years. That night, she returned home later than usual. Evelyn sat waiting in the living room. "You're late." Maya smiled tiredly. "Long day." Then she told her everything. The conference, Whitmore, his apology. Evelyn listened quietly, then said simply, "Well?" Maya chuckled. "That's it?" Her grandmother shrugged. "Baby, if a man spends his entire life requiring humiliation before he learns humility—" She raised an eyebrow. "Then his punishment was never losing the bench." Maya frowned. "What was it?" Evelyn smiled sadly. "Having to live long enough to understand who he became." Silence. Then both women laughed softly. Later that night, Maya stood alone once more on the front porch. The same porch where she had once waited for Evelyn to return from work. The same porch where she had once harbored dreams too expensive to articulate. The same porch from which she had almost watched the world take everything. Now she stood there as attorney Maya Williams, respected, feared, vindicated. But more than that, she stood there as proof. Proof that poverty could delay destiny without extinguishing it. Proof that injustice could wound without prevailing. Proof that one person's refusal to remain silent could fracture institutions built on intimidation. Her phone buzzed. A message from Bennett and Cole. New client intake request. Elder housing discrimination case. Client specifically requested you. Maya smiled and typed back, "I'll take it." She slipped the phone into her pocket, glanced once at the quiet street, then at the house behind her, and in the stillness of that ordinary night, Maya Williams understood the truth of her own story. They had mocked her because they believed she was beneath them. They had attacked her because they feared what she might become. They had tried to bury her because they knew that those who rise are the most difficult to control. But every insult had honed her. Every obstacle had trained her. Every attempt to break her had forged the woman standing here now. And somewhere in Chicago, fearful men in opulent offices were still learning her name. I am the reason.
In the end, the truth always comes out.